Hey everyone, my name is Nachum Russell, or Russ to most of you, because Sean can't say my name. And this is Sean O'Shea, for the one or two of you out there who might not know who Sean is. Sean runs the Good Dog training in LA. Are you in LA technically?
We're right at the end of LA County, yeah. So in Chatsworth is officially in LA.
Cool. So in LA and in New Orleans, where he is right now, in case anyone's looking to find him. Sean, obviously most people who are going to be following this know who you are a bit and know a bit about you. I know all my clients know you because they read your book, but can you tell us just a little bit about you before we jump into this, who you are, what you do and stuff like that for someone who might not know?
Man, right off with the pressure.
Let's do it.
Man, what else? So that is a truly challenging question. So everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of you guys know my journey, right? So started off ballet and all of that, at 40 years old, and worked really hard to try and get my mindset together, to try and figure out what I was doing that was impeding my accession or ascending into better parts of life. And so then I got into dog training, moved out of the music world, which I was doing along with balleting, and worked really hard on myself. And that started to open doors. People started to gravitate towards me as a dog walker. And then that kind of as you know, I think a lot of folks here that have moved into this world, you start off as a dog walker, and then people start asking you to train dogs and things like that. And to be perfectly honest, things went pretty, at the risk of sounding arrogant, and I so don't mean this, but as somebody who tried to play drums at a very, very, very high professional level from the time he was 3, that was an excruciatingly challenging endeavor. Dog training, honestly, always came easier to me. And so, not to mention, I wasn't dealing with a bunch of, hopefully none of my bandmates are listening, a bunch of kind of toxic but beloved people, but that just were in a kind of tough spot. And when you're 40 years old, traveling around in a van or a bus with a bunch of people that are like, and it's basically being on a never-ending family trip across the country that never stops, right? And you're in no control of. And so when I got into the dog world, I found the freedom. I found the ability to create kind of the environment that I wanted, the world that I was moving into, which was a much more positive, healthy, communicative, more empowered in the way of being able to make my own decisions and take care of myself. And then strangely enough, everybody thinks if you're in the music world, and we actually played on some big hits and things like that. But the financial side of it was this. Everybody was like, oh yeah, so you must have been big pimping and all that. And it was nothing like that. We really struggled. And when I got into dog work, even just dog walking, I was making probably, I don't know, 70% more money straight out of the gate just dog walking than I was doing music. And I was my own boss. And is it weird that I'm looking at you? Should I be looking at the screen and not look at
I do the same thing because I feel like I'm looking through the screen at you. I do the same thing.
Okay. So anyways, I did the dog walking thing, and I immediately fell in love with the freedom. I immediately fell in love with, I'm also kind of a bit of a introvert, and I like to be alone. And that allowed me to really kind of put both those worlds together. And to be perfectly frank, people were being very kind and very supportive and rooting for me in a way that I hadn't experienced prior as a ballet, because most people aren't rooting for the ballet. They're come on, go kill it. And in my music world, the same thing was pretty toxic. So I managed to move out of that and into a space where things were actually felt healthy and empowering, and people were, here's the thing, a really simple, ridiculous thing. People were happy to see me. I'd show up at their house and they'd be like, it's so good to see you. And I'd be like, really? Like, nobody else that I've been dealing with for
Actually,
20 years have been happy to see me, you know?
you're actually doing something they appreciate now.
Yeah. And then I kind of started moving more and more into the dog training world. And like I said, a lot of it, not that it was easy, not any of it, because like everybody knows my story. I messed up my own dogs because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But when I got into it and started like really kind of putting my mind to it, a lot of the things started to come fairly naturally. And so it started to kind of create some momentum, and then things kind of took off, which was more shocking to me than anybody else. I truly was like the phone calls and the work and people, people gravitating towards me for help was something that was truly surprising. And
So, so you started off, I guess, your journey into dog training. I know because I've read your story and I've been following you for a while.
yeah,
And like you started off with your own dog that you kind of messed up, right? You didn't really know what you're doing. But how did you go from being a valet parker musician to dog walking? Was it just straight like I'm trying something new, or was it like us because you started working with your own dog, you realized you can work with dogs?
so you hit on it. So I had actually two dogs that were really problematic. And so Oakley was my severely dog aggressive dog who had injured dogs and killed the dog at one point. Junior was just out of control, and they were both reactive, and I was doing all the same stuff that, our clients that we see who struggle the most, hiding behind cars, hiding behind trees, avoiding dogs, all that stuff. So I had all that going on. Caesar came on, right? And I had friends who knew I was struggling, and they said, "Hey, check out the Dog Whisperer." And I chuckled, and I was like, "Dog Whisperer?" I'm like, that's the silliest name I've ever heard. And they said, "Just check it out." And so I did. And I know he's controversial, and I know there's lots of folks who feel, have mixed feelings about him, but there was a ton of valuable information in some very kind of fundamental, all-encompassing kind of fashions, rather than just like always handing out specific, precise protocols.
Right.
There was kind of a very large perspective he was delivering, and it was something I really needed to hear because I was just caught in this messy cycle with my dogs. And so I watched, and I would get up at 5 in the morning because I had all the DVDs, and I would watch, and then I'd slow it down, and then I'd rewind it, and I'd watch, and I was trying to learn the timing more so than a lot of the kind of like the wording and things like that. But I was watching and I was noticing, oh wow, like I didn't have the words for it, but he's actually addressing arousal before it ever peaks.
Yep.
But he doesn't have the language to be able to, and I don't mean that as a diss, but coming from another country, he just didn't have the language to be able to say like, okay, so as the arousal's just starting, I'm going to nail it, bring it back down, tap it, and then we have a much different situation. But I was internalizing that. I was like, he's doing something that's not, it's not magic, but it looks like magic.
Yeah.
So I started getting into that, and then I started working with my guys, and it was a long slog. I'd really messed them up, and they were a disaster. But I went out every day, twice a day, and I walked at a park that was I think we might have even talked about this at some point. Walked in a rectangular, at this park in a rectangular kind of fashion where people all walked their dogs or jogged or rode bikes, and we walked the opposite direction twice a day, just the gauntlet. And it was as much for my dogs as it was for me, because I was so anxious. I was so stressed about correcting my dogs in public, having a shit show where my dogs fall apart, and all of that kind of social pressure. And doing that every day kind of helped me get over the hump to where I could go out and just kind of suck up any kind of criticism, anything like that. And I had to get really firm with my dogs, and to kind of shorten up this very lengthy story where it could go for 3 hours. I ended up, after maybe a year and a half, like I bought prong collars, right? And the kind so big you put them over their heads. Like that's where I was at, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't find any videos to help me out with that stuff. So I was like, well, I guess it goes over the head. And so I was working like in a pretty amateur fashion at that point, but I was super determined. And next thing I know, my dogs started moving in a very different direction. And the reactivity started to dissipate. Then I got into low-level e-collar training. I was already doing Caesar stuff. So for me, it's kind of like, I always try and explain to people that it's the combination of three things. So kind of standard obedience, not that by any stretch I'm like a keeler, like, like I know it in and out. It's like I have a fairly decent handle on straight up obedience with leash and prong, things like that. Caesar stuff, doing natural interactions and understanding hierarchy and how dogs perceive you, and even physical corrections with hands and things like that. All of that stuff. Then I got into low-level e-collar training, and at that point, all there were written out protocols on the internet, right? So this guy Lou Castle, who was a dog trainer, I don't know if he's still around, but man, he was kind of a big cheese back in the day. And I think a lot of the folks were not sharing a lot of videos, but they would put things into words. And so he had very, very clearly articulated protocols for escape training, moving to avoidance training. And so I would go out with a notepad because my memory is terrible. So I'd write them all down, and then I'd go to the park with my dog somewhere secluded, and I'd try and work on getting them into a good space. And so I bought a 1900 double dog system, and I did a ton of food work because, as anybody who doesn't know, let me like back this up just a tiny bit. I started off as a pure positive trainer. I had every book, every D.
Like, sorry, you were training. You were training other people's dogs purely positively, or with your own dogs?
Just mine. And so I was doing food work and luring and all that stuff, and I was studying my butt off, and it all sounded so good, as it typically does. And I got my dogs into a great space, and then I did the thing that a lot of people do, which is like, okay, so we're ready for the next step. And then I quickly found out the limitations when my highly prey drive, dog aggressive dogs saw one of those things. We lost it. We had no control. And so, and it's the only time that I ever did any kind of internship. I went to 2 sessions with a friend of mine who was a pure positive trainer, but she was tough as nails. Like, she didn't monkey around, but she was doing pure positive work. But boy, did she have like a gleam in her eye or an evil look in her eye. I think the dogs were all like, I appreciate the food, but like, let's keep things good. And so I followed her around a couple puppy sessions, but I didn't really get much. And within short order, she started recommending her actual serious clients to me, which was strange and shocking. But it reinforced that something's going on. Like, I'm picking up something that's working here. And she's been doing it for 20 years. And so I started to move away from the pure positive world, which I dove into deeply, and started doing all this other work with my guys. And the e-collar work really was a game changer. That's when my dogs all learned that proximity doesn't matter. Like, I don't have to be standing a foot away from you, and I don't have to be holding your leash to have control. And when they realize that, they're all like, oh, okay, I got it. But prior to that, if you drop the leash, my dogs were like, they're gone, And so I did a lot of e-collar work with them based off of food work. So food work first, and a bit of prong, but it was typically food work, and then a ton of e-collar work. And I put those 3 together: Caesar's primal stuff, traditional obedience, and then low-level e-collar training, and kind of try to find my mix that was a good combination. Because I started out, after I did pure positive training, I started out trying to go to clients' houses and teach them how to do what Caesar does. And for anybody who's done that, you quickly learn that there's some limitations when you're telling a 65-year-old woman whose dog, Big Pity's jumping on her, okay, so now's when you do a hand correction. It's like, it's just not reasonable. It's not realistic. It's not logical. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that it doesn't serve the client. So I was like, oh man, I have to find another way. So that's when I started doing more prong and more e-collar. And anyways, that's kind of how I got into it. And it just kept kind of spiraling and going and going and going. And And I was also super motivated. I was doing a lot of personal development work, so I was super motivated about the possibilities. What could I create? What could I build? And what positive thing could I put out in the world through dog training? And I know that sounds all sweet and Pollyanna and all that good stuff, but it's like it's truly where my head was at. And so we did that. Moved out of our tiny apartment. Then we moved to North Hollywood, which was a smaller house. We kept building. Then we moved to Chatsworth, which was a bigger property. I've had a loft here in New Orleans for about 7 or 8 years. And so we just kept building and building. And that's kind of been the process. I mean, it's had its ups and downs, as you know, like social media is a dastardly, wild west. And so I've been the target of plenty of things. I have definitely some outspoken opinions that not everybody agrees with, and I get that. So, but it is what it is, and I've tried to put my best foot forward, as honest and as authentic as I possibly can, and I just kind of have to live with whatever comes from that.
So I also did a ton of Cesar Milan stuff before when I started off. So I started off in a similar fashion with my own dog, who was like the worst dog ever, and he was my first dog. I didn't grow up with dogs, so I had him, and I was like, as long as I love him and give him a lot of food and treat him like my baby, then everything's gonna be perfect. And it did. It worked really well for 6 months, but then he turned 6 months old, and like he became horrible. So I started watching a ton of Cesar Milan before I knew that dog training was a thing. Like I just thought that there's Cesar Milan and then there's dog owners. And what I took from Cesar Milan, and I think this is kind of what you were saying, was a lot of the stuff that not so many dog trainers necessarily speak about a lot is what Cesar was showing, in the sense of like how you need to be and how you need to feel and how the dog should think of you. It's a lot of the relationship stuff that's involved that he shows, and that's why he's so good at it, because he naturally kind of got it.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to teach, but I think it's kind of like the glue. And once you start to add that other stuff in, you realize that like you kind of had what you were doing. Now you have the tools to actually translate that into a practical way to make it really work.
And he had the guts to be on TV and show a lot of things that I don't know if you could do today.
No.
In the current climate, I truly don't think he could have done what he did, but he inspired so many people, like you said, to see, okay, so here's the relationship, here's the human component, here's what corrections look like, here's what timing looks like, here's what all of these stacked up create. And if people could put that together, they could put together some pretty good fundamentals, because what he was doing is an interesting thing, because when you look back at the kind of olden days, I think there was a lot of guarding information. You know what I mean? So for one thing, back in the day when I was, first starting out, there wasn't a whole lot there. I don't even know if YouTube was around 20 something years ago. I can't remember when it started. Facebook certainly wasn't. And so there wasn't a lot of information like that. But I think the older guard was really careful about like what they put out, what they shared. There were things like Rob McFarlane's DVDs, which helped a lot of people. I struggled with her DVDs, and that's not a diss on her DVDs. It's just a reality that I struggled. I couldn't put the pieces together, and who knows, maybe it's just my bad brain. But that was one of the first people from the old guard that I saw like start to kind of share a more comprehensive view of like e-collar training. So anyways, yeah, that's kind of where it all went. And I think, I don't know about you, but for me, watching Cesar, I think it naturally pushed me in a direction of being excited about dealing with really difficult dogs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that has its pros and its cons. And for people that are able to handle it and that can be safe, it can be a great thing. For people that are romantic about it, like I can save every dog no matter how bad they are, and I'm going to be okay. It's like there's a fine line between like working a dog that's on the edge and sending yourself to the hospital, So
I think that's one of those things that a lot of people end up learning the hard way, is that whole saving every dog, because at the end, like most of us dog trainers who are in it, like obviously we want to make money and you should, but you also want to help dogs and help owners. It's like you want to help every dog. We love dogs. And like I know I had that mindset for a while. And it took a lot of both hearing other trainers who've been at it much longer than me discuss this idea, and also kind of starting to get my hand, like starting to work with more dogs besides like 14-week-old puppies, you know? And the more I got into it, the more I was like, okay, either I can't handle this dog and that's okay. Here's someone who I think could help you. Or like this dog, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not the one that's meant to be helped.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's a hard one because like everyone's in it with a good heart.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the whole boundary side of all this stuff that comes in. It's like, are you really helping if you're just doing it to try to save every dog?
Yeah, and I would say that one of the great things about the more time you spend with dogs, and especially if you're working with firmer dogs, the better your insight is into when you're really seeing one of those dogs that is likely beyond help. Sorry, I've got Shelby like sabotaging me here with these bings. Yeah, I think because we've worked with so many serious dogs, like when one comes in, I've got a pretty good handle. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be euthanized or anything like that, but it does mean or it likely means that we have to truncate the program. It needs to be simplified. It needs to be done in a way that the dog can succeed, that the owners can live with them. And I'm perfectly happy because my ego's not wrapped up in how fancy the dog looks, which a lot of people don't like about the way I train. They want to see dogs look fancier, happier, this and that. And for me, it's not a priority. The priority is, can I help this family and this dog stay together, and can I keep them in the home? Can they find a way to work with them and live with them and be safe? And then if not, then we have to have some serious conversations. Luckily, those conversations don't happen all that often, but when they do, I've seen enough dogs where it's like, okay, he's already bitten the owner twice and sent him to the hospital. They've got a baby on the way. It's like, you have to make some pretty brutal calls about that stuff. And all of us, no matter how, I would imagine, no matter how much experience anybody has, you still question yourself. Is there something I'm missing? Is there something I didn't do? Is there a different way, And so hard stuff, man. If you're getting into the world of like really challenging dogs, it can take a toll.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that is also actually looking at the dog in front of you without, and this is how it's been for me, without concern of what it's going to look like in the video you post, without concern of what other people who aren't the client are going to think, and just looking at the dog and the client and what you can actually do for that dog and what you can expect from that dog. Like, for me, that was a big thing. Like I used to like to say that I train dogs to be off leash, and every dog I work with goes off leash. And then I realized that's just a lie, because not every dog should be off leash, and not every dog needs that, and not every family needs that. If I can get a lot of dogs to be off leash, like hell yeah. But if I can get a dog to just go for a walk with its owner and not fall on her face every time, like hell yeah, that's also just as awesome for two different people.
Yeah. So I think that's a spot a lot of dog trainers get caught in. Their egos say, "Hey, I've got to be able to achieve this, and this." It's like, what are people going to say? What's the training community going to say? I love that you came to the conclusion of like, there are dogs that probably shouldn't be off leash trained, and I don't mean off leash trained as far as like that they know how to work with the knee collar and things like that in the house and maybe in the yard, but I mean at a park, roaming around and on a recall, and things like that. We've had numerous dogs like that are, I'm just going to be straight, like dogs that if given the opportunity would kill another dog. Like, I'm never going to tell a client that I care about, which is all of them. I'm never going to tell them like, he's got a great recall, and as long as you're ahead of him, we'll be okay. It's like, I never want to put somebody in that position. So I want to have an honest conversation with them and say like, look, here's what he's capable of. He understands these commands, but when you find yourself in a situation where there's a dog that gets his goat or whatever it might be, you might find yourself where your tools don't work. And a lot of dog trainers might come back at you and say, well, you didn't proof enough, you didn't use this protocol enough. You know what I mean? There's a million different ways to look at it, but I just truly feel that it's a disservice to the integrity of this industry. I would love so much more honesty about what's truly possible rather than fairy tales of like every dog comes out of here and they prance down the street off leash and jump into the car and off they go to live a happy, happily ever after. And while Shelby, my God, Marta, tell Shelby to stop it. So I'm sabotage wherever I go.
And I think a lot of it is knowing, also being able to recognize that dogs have limitations, just in general. Like, dogs have limitations and we have limitations, and that's one side of it. And the other side of it is also recognizing that we train dogs. Dog owners don't train dogs. Dog owners live with dogs and they own dogs, and then they go to whatever their job is and they want to come home and just have a simple life with their dog. The average dog owner. We're not talking about like dog fanatics and dog geeks who are like passionate about this, right?
Yeah.
And that's who I'm serving. Like, my average client just wants a dog that they can enjoy, and to try to make my clients reach a standard that I would want their dog to have is unfair to what I'm really doing, which is serving a client and the family and their dog.
It's super selfish.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, so here's what I believe is what you need to be doing as an owner of this dog, because I'm the all-knowing dog trainer. It's like, it's the worst thing you could possibly do. So for me, when we sit down with clients, we always talk about goals. What are your goals? What are you looking for? What are the main pain points? And then we try and tackle as much of those as possible. We also add in a bunch of other stuff that they probably aren't aware of that can be helpful. But yeah, I mean, we get plenty of dogs, because, so let me just say this really quick. We've marketed ourselves, TGD has marketed ourselves for going on 15 years. It's like the place you go where you have a really, really problem dog. And so what that creates is, strangely enough, if you do it right, a marketing magnet that attracts really the most challenging dogs. And so we get a lot of dogs that are cognitively compromised, that have major, major issues as far as anxiety disorders, things like that. They can't process simple information. They can't ever relax. I mean, it's some of the hardest stuff. And so it's highly stressful on the team, but we're always working to find ways to, okay, here's what we've got. This is a tough situation. This dog is an anxious wreck. What can we do training wise? But then also, which a lot of people push back against, what can we add medication wise? So we've been experimenting with CBD, with THC, and been having some really great luck. And
yeah, I want to know about that, because I said I'm curious about that, because we chatted a little bit about it in terms of like fireworks and storms and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of touched on it in like a private conversation a little bit, but I'm very interested in that. How do you decide when to move towards any sort of medication, whether it's cannabis or pharmaceuticals, and at what point do you decide like this is not enough, we're moving on to the next stage? What's that process? What does that look like?
So for us, if we're 2 weeks into a training program and the dog is struggling not just to do the actual commands, but struggling to exist. He's on place or she's on place and she's melting down. Nothing's being asked of her or him, nothing's being required, but they're melting down. When I see that in a some consecutive days of that kind of behavior, like, man, the quality of life for this dog, and I don't care what we can train this dog's going to go home and live in this cycle of discomfort and diminished quality of life. And so for us, and I just haven't seen much help. Not that there haven't been people that said they have, but with like Prozac and psychotropics and things like that. But so for situational high anxiety, which is like a vet visit for a dog that absolutely goes ape, or fireworks, to be honest, like, and people can psych me off about it, but it's like Xanax is a perfect situational anxiety reducer. It lasts for about 4 to 6 hours. Dogs take it very easily. They have zero issues with it that I've seen, and they actually are able to get through things that would absolutely unhinge them, and now we got the trash man outside, and derail their quality of life. So that's one thing. So we talked. So you're talking about fireworks. What were we talking about?
Fireworks, thunderstorms. I think you
Thunderstorms.
mentioned two different things though, because there's the dog that has that overall anxiety meltdown where it's just like nothing training wise that you're doing for 2 weeks is really making any headway at all. And then the other one is more like the random things that come up in life, like fireworks and thunderstorms and vet visits, where it's like it's very hard to really train through a lot of that with dogs where that's very extreme. Like I own one of those, one of my personal dogs, and I train my dogs. Like, it's not like they're just in freedom. They have structure, they have all that stuff. But one firework goes off and she has a meltdown for the rest of the night. Like she's panting, she can't sleep. The only thing that kind of makes her a little bit more comfortable is going into a crate. But even then, she's not herself, and she's the most happy-go-lucky of my dogs.
So she's terribly uncomfortable during the whole
Yeah.
ordeal. So for me, our dogs, our border collies came from New Zealand, and they had storms, but they didn't have anything like what we have here. And so they arrived here, and we started having massive thunderstorms, and they're intense. And the dogs started flipping out. And it's like those dogs are highly trained. They know all the commands. They know how to do all that stuff. And I hear a lot of people say, "Well, train the dog," and
right.
like while the storm's going on, work them through the program. And it's like, fuck, man, it's. Am I allowed to cuss on this?
You can do whatever you want. Yeah,
Okay.
you can curse.
Okay.
You're like this is the first time we're half hour and first time you cursed. You're doing good compared to some other folks.
Okay, I feel so good now. Where was I?
They came from New Zealand and the storm started.
Yeah, thank you. And so we could have sat and been like really, really stubborn about it. Well, we're not giving in. We're going to work these dogs through it, and they're going to find their way to be able to cope with these storms. And all I did was watch these very well-trained, balanced, sweet dogs absolutely suffer.
Yeah.
I mean suffer. You're talking about getting up in the middle of the night, throwing up, diarrhea, everything. Like the only thing they didn't do was like try and dive through a window. Like it was that much stuff. And so we got some Xanax, and all the vets around here know that one, backwards and forwards, because so many dogs struggle with it. And as long as we get ahead of the storm, as long as we're not waiting until they're really off kind of the charts with it, man, they just relax. They're cool. They take it, and they in 4 or 5 hours, the storm's gone, and they're in a totally different space. So for me, I'm really okay with that. And that also goes for vet appointments. If a dog is going to have an absolute meltdown, it's like, okay, so we're going to just be like, it's going to be training, and we're going to show this dog how it's going to be, or can you help a dog that can actually, it's like before they go and they pull your wisdom teeth out, right, and stick their foot on your forehead and do like a nice yanking job. Typically, they give you Xanax, so you're nice and relaxed, and you're like, take them all out, man. I don't need these teeth; they're just a pain in the ass,
Yeah.
And so, so this isn't to be a drug pusher. It's just something that a lot of trainers push back against because they feel, I think, that it's a failure of training.
Well, I'll tell you why. The way we started chatting about it was you posted about it in your stories one time.
Yeah.
It was a big storm in New Orleans, and you showed, I think it was the 2 border collies, and you said that you give them Xanax for the storms, and the reason why I would push, like, felt like a pushback just from seeing you post that. I was like, that's crazy. Like Sean's doing that, right? Was because so many times dogs are over prescribed on drugs that don't need it. It's simply because they've never trained, and people just say, here's a pill and now your dog is fine. And like I see these dogs who are on medication and they're miserable and they're not trained and they're not behaving and that's not helping their state of mind. And I think that that's where a lot of the pushback comes, especially from balanced trainers who are so strong on let's work on the mindset, let's train the dog, let's let it be a healthier dog, that it's almost like even if there is a place to actually use these things, it's like, no, we can't ever do that because it's so horrible and we see how it doesn't work. You know, and I think that's where a lot of the pushback comes from, because I know for me, that's where there was any pushback on the idea. That's why I right away reached out to you. I was like, what's up with this? So, you know?
Yeah, and so you know that if I'm doing the work, that we've already trained the dogs and we've already worked them hard through that. And Marta had these dogs highly trained before they ever arrived, you know, in LA and then in New Orleans. So it's not a lack of training. Now, if she showed up and she was like, they just do what they want, they're free spirits, and like I'd be like, I'm not going to give them medication until we train them. Like it's all that, whether it's TGDLA or New Orleans, it's always the same concept. It's like train the dog, see what the training creates, check in with the dog, and check in like daily, check in weekly, check in bi-weekly. What are we getting? Are we seeing anxiety dissipate tremendously, or are we seeing a dog suffering continuously? And so if you're doing the training and the anxiety and the fear and the concern, the worry and the overwhelm is dissipating, awesome. I don't think you need any medication. But if you're doing all of that work and your dog or the client's dog is suffering, man, I think it's absolutely, people are gonna hate me for this, but it's I think it's unethical. If you have something that can help a dog who's suffering to feel better for something they can't control, and you've done all the work with them and they've done all the work with you, and they're still struggling, it's like, so what stand are you going to hold them to?
Right.
Like, take it, grin and bear it, while they're sitting there and salivating and shaking and freaking out. It's just like, my only goal is what helps. And if Xanax helps a dog, where we've done, like you said, where we've done the work to make sure the foundation's there, we're not just like phoning it in and it's lazy and it's like, well, let's get some meds on board because this dog's just crazy, like a lot of vets will do and a lot of owners will do. That's the distinction. Do the work, make sure that the training's in place, and whatever gaps you see there, then you make an informed decision about, do we need meds on board, or can the dog make it through without it? And how much of a compromise in their quality of life is there versus not doing the training, not doing the work, and then, you know, just trying to justify like boosting up your dog with God knows what in order for it to just like get through. And that's just lazy, you know. I mean, you're always going to find your lazy owners. And I don't mean to be nasty about it, but it's like, it's just human nature. So you're gonna find owners that are like, yep, so we gave her some meds and she was great. It's like, cool, but could she or he been better with training? Maybe. You'll never know if you don't try. So your question was a really good one, because it was like, oh man, Sean's using Xanax and talking about stuff like that. And I've literally watched it, because we've been here now for 2 years with these guys, and I've watched them go from absolute meltdowns, give them the medication, a low dose, and then watch them be able to like hang out. They're not dopey and stumbling around and looking like, you know, like drunks on the street. They're just comfortable. And for me, like, I don't care about anybody's judgment on that. I honestly, I could give I could give two shits about that. I just don't care. It's like, if they feel better, good for them. And client dogs, I'm constantly talking back and forth with the LA team. How's this dog looking? He's not looking good. He's still stressed, still super anxious, and he's shaking. And, you know, we've just kind of let him decompress, but he just can't get over the hump. So then we reach out to the owners. What do you guys think about giving this a shot? And then, of course, it depends what area they live in, because certain states don't allow it, you know, and cities and things like that. And in LA, it's okay. And we talked to the owners. We let them know, like, we've worked through all of these protocols training wise, and most of the owners are like, yeah, let's try it, because they don't want to see their dogs
But
suffer.
that's not Xanax. That's for CBD with THC.
It could be either one, right? So I wasn't super clear about that, but it's like, if the dog, let me clarify. So if the
Yeah.
dog has an ongoing case of anxiety that they don't seem to ever kind of edge off of, then CBD THC seems to be the answer, because Xanax is very situational.
Right.
You get a window of 4 to 6 hours at the most. So I prefer that for like major situations. You're going to like ship a dog, you know, fly your dog across the country. You're going to take him to the vet and he likes to maul the vet. You know what I mean? Anything like that. Those are situations where I do Xanax. Dogs that are just struggling and it never changes, then that's when I would want to go with something that's going to be an ongoing and hopefully healthy situation for them, as far as not having any negative repercussions on what they take.
Yeah. And
Does
have you?
that make sense as far as like?
Yeah, I understand. It's the point of its quality of life. What it boils down to is quality of life, right? And obviously, it's not a cheap, easy way out. It's let's work our ass off and get as far as we could with the work and keep doing the work, but then also try to add something in that might also help the dog. Now, do you ever see that dogs get weaned off of it when the owners continue really, really putting in the work, like the real work, and then also using that? Is there ever a time where you see like that the owners get to wean off of it, or this is kind of something like this is what the dog does now?
Good question. So we tell all the clients the same thing, which is like, do the work, use the medication, and let's check in 2 months. Let's check in 3 months. Let's check in, and we just keep checking in. And if they're like, dog's looking great, we haven't had a single issue, then we can introduce the possibility. Now, do you want to remove the medication or to decrease the medication and see what you get? And then if things go south, then you know that that was
Right.
a positive influence. And if you see no fallout, hey, maybe you're on the road to being able to let that kind of fall off, as far as a regular daily thing. So it really depends on the dog. And I'm trying to think of some specific dogs. I know we've had dogs who have come in, been on THC, and then gotten into a better space, and the owners have either diminished the dosage or have removed it. And so I tell our trainers and I tell clients, it's like, man, dogs never cease to amaze me.
Right.
Neither do owners, and so I never know. Like, I have a kind of a baseline of what I think tends to happen, and then I get an email and they're like, he's great.
Yeah.
On anything anymore, I'm like, that's fucking amazing. And so what we try and do is base off what we've seen the majority of data as far as like what's been most helpful, but we always leave it up to them. Like, what do you guys think? Are you comfortable with it? Does this make sense? And for most owners, it's worth a shot.
Right. Now, for people who can't legally get THC, have you seen any success with CBD alone? No, that's what I thought.
No, and we started with that, right? So we started with CBD because CBD is just like a pretty benign, like, and
Right.
it's supposed to have some physical attributes that are that are helpful. But we were watching these dogs that were highly anxious, and we weren't seeing any change. And so then we asked the owners, like, do you mind if we up it to THC, which, like, it elevates it to a new level, right? Now you're talking about, a different substance
Yeah.
or a different aspect of it. And they were all very easy about it, and they just wanted to see, like, what does it give? Because if it was my dog and it was a mess and suffering, and a trainer I trusted said, do you want to try this? I'd be like, well, yeah, let's try it. We can always get rid of it, but let's try it first.
Do you think
Yeah.
do you think a big part of why people are receptive to it coming from not just that it's coming from you, but coming from the people who are coming to you, I guess, are a lot of them are coming as like a last resort, right? They've been through other trainers, a lot of them, they struggle. Like you don't get the average easy-go-lucky golden doodle, right? You get like these hard cases, right?
On lucky days we do, yes.
But do you think that that's might play a big role in why people are so like, let's just do this, like just whatever you say, we'll try it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no getting around the fact that like if you've been to 3 or 4 trainers, and then if you've researched us and you found out what kind of dogs we work with, and what the results tend to look like and what the owners have to say, I think it creates a lot more trust as far as taking risks on things that maybe you're not so sure of, things like that. So now that said, it's not like every dog's getting put on CBD, THC, but
Right.
we, and it's a hard thing to watch, but we get, I would say more than most trainers, dogs that are at the high end of like what, if you were to see it in a human being, you would say that is an anxious disaster of a human being that's barely functioning. And so the dogs aren't going to like articulate it and be like, I'm seeing this and I'm freaking out. They're just, you're just going to watch them suffer, you know? So, so we've seen a lot of that. And, so I'm really happy to investigate, and our whole kind of like, our whole protocol, not a protocol, but our whole kind of like blueprint, if you want to call it that, has always just been what helps. I don't care. I don't care if it's not accepted by the community. I don't care if it breaks all the rules. I don't give a shit about any of that. It's like, does this help? And if it does, then I'm all for it, because here's the part that nobody wants to hear from me, is that as much as I love dog trainers, my first allegiance is to dog owners.
Yes.
Like I'm with you guys, and I want everybody to do well and succeed, but I'm not here to kiss any dog trainer's ass or win any popularity contests. I'm here to have owners do well. And if that pisses off dog trainers, which it typically does, that it just is what it is. But
I'll tell you, that's what attracted me to your work, was that exact thing. Because I never, when I started putting myself on social media and stuff, like I've built an awesome community of a lot of dog trainers who I love and respect. And I get to do this where dog trainers come on just to talk to me, which I think is awesome. But like when I started putting out content, my number one goal was dog owners. And I think that when I saw that, and I saw a lot of other trainers who I felt weren't necessarily doing that all the way. And it's hard to do that because there's all that judgment, right? When you put yourself online, there's a ton of judgment. And the judgment is generally not coming from dog owners who want your help. It's generally coming from someone else who thinks they can do it better, right? And
very nicely said, yes.
Right? And I think a big part of what attracted me towards what you were doing was that there was that vibe through it all the way through of, unless you were speaking directly to dog trainers, it was very clear who you were there for. And I think that's important. It's like dog trainers, first of all, dog trainers don't pay my bills, right? But more than that is like dog trainers are not sending their dogs for help. And dog trainers generally, even if they struggle with their own dogs, they generally know what to do. They don't need another trainer really to put out content for them. It's dog owners that don't know what to do. And it's so important to have that. I think it's like a breath of fresh air when an owner sees that. They feel like this is for me.
Yeah, I'd say it's a strange industry where the actual end user is so not prioritized. Do you know what I mean? And there's a million great dog trainers with great attitudes who want the best, but man, there's a lot of folks out there that are, whose egos are so wrapped up in how they're perceived and what other dog trainers are saying about them constantly. And I just think like if you're not prioritizing dog owners as your number one thing, man, you've already lost. Like and not to be like too dramatic about it, but I truly feel like that. And I've even toyed with like posts where I'm like, let me spell this out. But I don't want to create this division where dog trainers think I don't care about them or don't appreciate or respect them, because I do. But and when it comes down to making comparisons about where the allegiance lies, there's zero comparison. It's
So
always dog owners.
So then how did you branch off though into becoming a dog trainer, teacher, whatever you want to call it, mentor? Because you do T3, you do shadow programs, you do internships, you do a lot for dog trainers, especially like newer dog trainers. At what point did you decide like I'm going to add this in, especially going with what you just said, where my number one priority is all dog owners?
Yeah. Well, to me, it's like as long as the shadow students, interns, things like that, T3, as long as people show up with good attitudes, I'm all for it. Like if you show up and your attitude is like, how do I better serve the community? Like I'm going to give you everything. I tell everybody on my team, the best way to get the least amount from me is be like, I know it all and I don't hear anything. And I'll just be like, cool, you know it all, go do your thing until we find out that you don't. So yeah, I'm very comfortable and I truly enjoy teaching students or other dog trainers about how to better think about training, how to open their minds, how to think about some different aspects of it, how to build their businesses, how to build better lives, how to treat clients in a different way. So the fact that I prioritize clients doesn't negate the fact that I also care about trainers, but there's just a different distinction as far as where that's at. Now, if you came to shadow with me and you were shit talking owners, we'd have a big problem, right? If you were like, yeah, owners, they just show up, they never want to, I would be like, dude, look, you're in victim mindset, and if you don't shift out of that, you're not going anywhere. And so that's kind of my thing. I love teaching. We just had Pat here from Best Paw Forward Dog Training, and it was a blast teaching her. And we have interns every 3 months in LA. And I love that as long as they're super committed and super focused, because you get some people like, oh, this will be great. And then they're like, this is a lot of work. It's like, you can bet your ass it's a lot of work. So for me, I love the idea of being able to teach people how to do better things for themselves. But I will not kowtow to the dog trainer like hierarchy of like how you have to perform in order to be accepted in the, with the elder council, if you will. You know what I mean? So
I
that's
think social media is like a blessing and a curse to that stuff, because it allows some like random New York Jewish kid to pop on and start training dogs, right? And at the same time, it's also like now the gatekeepers can also see what some random kid is doing, right? So it goes both ways. But I think it also, a lot of it, I guess in general, not just dog training, in every industry, social media broke down the gatekeepers. It allows for everyone to prove who they are straight to the client, to the potential client right away. And it's it's a lot more real. Even though everyone says social media is fake, I find it's a lot more authentic than that having to prove yourself to the person above you so that you can finally help the client who needs you, right?
yeah. And I think social media, and I think you probably remember this from T3, but like social media is not just, and I think a lot of people get caught up on this, it's just showing results of dog training. And what I've always tried to push is that what you don't realize is that, not you, but the universal you, human beings are looking, they're shopping for other trustworthy human beings, right? So if you present yourself over and over on social media, eventually, if you're full of shit, those cracks are going to show. And if you're a solid person, that's going to show. And so that's one of the things I like most about social media is that I've watched for a long period of time. I've watched people come up and down and up and down and do their thing. And so that's maybe one of the biggest benefits of it is as a consumer, I could watch you and I could be like, cool, I like what he's doing with dogs, but I really like his empathy and I really like his kindness and I really like that he's measured about this stuff. and he's not shit talking and blaming and stuff like that, that would probably cause me to gravitate towards you. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, you know, some people do obviously, but a lot of folks still get caught up in a lot of like nasty business, and that nasty business comes right back at them. As far as if you're a consumer and you're like watching somebody talk trash about another trainer, like, I don't want to go see you. You know, even if I had nothing to do with dogs, I'd be like, ooh, you know.
Yeah, you get to see you get to see as much as someone shows about a person, but even what they're trying not to show, you get to see eventually. And that's the part that a lot of people miss. And it's also the part of why a lot of people are successful. Like, I think somebody who's the best, we're using dog training, but in really any industry, the best in that industry is not just the best because of their skills in that industry. It's also because of what people see in that person as a person that connects them to them, right? And it's that connection that really does it, because I can train dogs just as well as the next guy over, let's say. But if they see that there's something about me or something about that guy that they like more as a person more, they're hiring the one they like more, not the one necessarily that has the better skills, especially when it comes to the average consumer, right? Who's just looking for someone to work with, right?
And not for major, like, explosive problems. Like,
right.
Can you get my dog to walk nice? Can he recall? Can he go to plays? You know, I mean, you don't need like.
And at the end of the day, even with that stuff, like, there are multiple people to choose from. What makes you choose one over the other? So obviously you look for the results, but you also are looking for, who do I connect with, right? There has to be that connection. And I think every business has that, every sale has that. It's connection, it's relationship building.
Yeah.
Social media allows that to happen before you ever meet.
Yeah.
So it's a lot stronger.
Yeah, and that's the like you said, there's negative sides to social media, obviously, but from a consumer standpoint, if you're a smart consumer, it's really a gift, because you can bypass, 25 different people that you're like, ooh, no thanks, right? And then see somebody and go like, and of course you can always be wrong. You can always think somebody's good and maybe they're really putting it on really well. And you find that you work with them and it's like, okay, they weren't as good as I thought. But I'd say for the most part, it's pretty, like, this is one of the big reasons people don't like doing videos, is because it exposes you so much. It's so hard to hide. I mean, you can turn the music, you can turn the natural sound off and just train dogs and da 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 da. But when you have to start talking to people, like, man, there's nowhere to hide. And if I'm a consumer, that's what I want to see. I'm like, so who are you?
Yep.
What do you say about this?
Instagram stories is where that's at. Like, I feel like that's where, because you can't, I mean, you technically could edit Instagram stories, but most of the time they're unedited, right?
Yeah.
And it's just you on camera or you showing something, whatever it is. But it's I think from the main platforms that people use, I guess, in this industry, I guess, well, now there's TikTok, but whatever. I'm not even talking about TikTok, but like Facebook and Instagram, right? And when you have the stories, like, that's the part where you get to see, I think, the most realness of, most authenticity of a lot of people. And that's why a lot of people have a hard time doing them, because it's like in your face on that. I know when I started, that was like the most uncomfortable, was having the camera on me, whether it was like doing videos of me talking to the camera or stories. That was for sure the most uncomfortable. It's also where I had the most growth. I mean, I love being on camera now. So
nice. I've found that for Instagram stories, it's always better for me if I'm kind of in the midst of doing something. Like, I can do it standing and talking, but personally, I get a little bit self-conscious if I do that. But if I'm out walking a dog, walking or doing something, it's just enough of a distraction to keep my mind flowing and feeling in a comfortable zone before I'm like, the world's watching.
Yep.
And you're like, oh God, I don't know what to say. So I agree that Instagram stories is a challenging one. And I just think human beings are intricately programmed to look for bullshit. And you can play all sorts of games, and you can have a website that looks fantastic, and you can say all sorts of great stuff. But like, smart consumers are going to see stuff and they're going to be like, I see the crack. I don't, and they may not be able to articulate it, but something feels wrong. Something doesn't feel comfortable with that, you know?
Yeah.
So what's been your biggest, like, let me turn the tables. What's been your biggest, like, breakthroughs and things as of late? What's come across your
I
work?
mean, well, I'm busier than ever. That's first of all. So
Nice.
that's awesome.
Is that COVID, like, tailing off?
COVID, I've been busier during COVID. Well, I took a break right away in the beginning just to like figure out how I'm doing everything.
Yeah.
But since then, like I've been busier than I was for months beforehand. So I think obviously it affects people differently, but thank God, knock on wood, like I'm not complaining. It's been amazing, and I'm booked out like for a long time right now. So that's really awesome. Um,
Nice.
yeah,
What do you attribute that to?
a couple of things. I recently learned how to. So I've been building a presence on social media a lot, working really hard on that. I'm extremely consistent. I haven't missed a day of posting on social media in over 2 years, every single day consistently. Um, and I have a system of how I do it. So it started off with daily training tips, which was on video, which was more of a challenge to myself than anyone else.
Yeah.
Um, and now I do like, and then obviously other stuff too. So working dogs and things like that. Now I do every morning daily training thought, which is more of a picture and written stuff. And then I still obviously do all the dog working stuff. But I was struggling with converting that. One second. No, place. Good boy. I was struggling with converting all these fans. Like, how do I now get clients?
Yeah.
Right. And I recently been working a lot on learning how to do that. And I think that was a big part of the shift was learning because there's an art to it of how to now draw someone in that's been a fan or that watches you or that loves who you are. But now, like, let's actually train your dog, right?
Yeah.
And from a business point of view, less dog training, but business point of view, I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I struggled with it, and I started to learn a lot on that aspect, reading, listening, learning from people. And I think that's been the big shift that I've found is how to actually change a fan into a client, right?
That's
And
nice.
ultimately, at the end of the day, helping more dogs and helping more owners, which is obviously the goal. Um, so I think that's been like my most recent breakthrough. That's for sure what it's been. Um,
Great.
yeah,
Great.
and I think that in terms of because we were talking about video and social media stuff, I think like I said this. So I started posting heavily on social media at T3. I did
Mhm.
my first daily training video at T3. It actually started
I
because
remember.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it actually started because Julie Barber from Julie's Canine Academy,
Mhm.
right? So she's like, "Hey Russ, you want to come on a video with us?" And I was like, no," but she's like, "Whatever, we'll ask you a question," and it's right. So,
Yeah.
so she like asked me a question, and I answered like a 30-second answer on something. I remember the whole thing. Remember where I was standing? It was traumatizing. It was bad, and and
I've got a good number of a therapist, so we'll get to it.
after that, I realized how uncomfortable I was. And I was like, if I'm going to be able to do this, I have to just do this
Yeah.
specific thing. Like, I was posting stuff on social media before, but it was more like a picture of a dog on place and talking about why place is important, right? Which is very easy when it's a picture,
Yeah.
right? And so I decided then that I was going to do 365 days of 60-second daily training tips. And I didn't miss a day. Like, I traveled to Europe, I did it from Europe. I got sick, I did it in bed. Like, and the more I did it, I started to see a shift in myself. If I started to care less and less of what the person watching thought of me, right? Like their opinion started to matter less and less. And it was a very strong personal development thing. Like
Yeah.
more than like, yeah, it attracted a lot of people to who I am because people started consistently seeing this. And that was awesome. And it helped build like the community that I'm trying to build. And it was the
Yeah.
start of that. But more than that, even if no one ever watched any of them, what it did for me was extremely powerful because, like every normal person, I struggled with what do you think of me? What do you think of me? Right. And when I put myself out there in a way of like, you're going to think things about me, and there's nothing I can do about the fact that you're going to think things about me, but I'm going to still do this because I committed to doing it.
Yeah.
it created a very massive shift in me, and I felt very empowered. But why that came up right now is because recently, since it's this time of year, T3, when I did T3 was in the summertime. And recently, like, you know how Facebook likes to throw old memories in your face just to make you feel like shit? So, so it popped up and I was like, oh, let me see what this is. And I watched it and I was like, oh my God, I literally cannot believe that's the same person, right? Like, I looked different, not just like that I did my beard a little differently then. Like, I looked like a different person just on camera. I was standing very stiff. I felt the energy was like, this is gross. Like, it, right? And so I recently spoke about it on my Instagram stories, and I was saying, like, I challenge anybody who's worried about what other people think, whether you're trying to build a business, a social media presence or not, or anything, but you all have social media because you're watching me. So do 1 week of videos for a minimum of 60 seconds with nothing else but you talking to the camera. Don't show your dogs. Don't show the beautiful scenery. Just you talking to the camera about anything, right? And then get back to me after. And I was like, I'll follow you. I'll like your stuff. Like, I'll follow your page and I'll support you. But afterwards, let's chat about what it was like. Nobody took me up on the offer yet. Well, one person did, but I don't think you did it. And if you're on here, you know who you are. But
it wasn't me.
Yeah, I still have that challenge up because I think it's, and I could only challenge that because I did it for a full year. Mm-hmm. And what it did for me was like the most powerful breakthrough since I've started training dogs really was then. And I think it actually plays into how I train dogs in a sense and how I help clients and customers because like we started to say, there's all the judgment out there in the dog training world. But the more I was okay with knowing that people are going to judge me, but I can't do anything about that besides do my best, be my best self, train dogs as best as I know how to, right?
Let it go. Yeah.
Then you let it go. And so, yeah, that's a massive thing that was for me, for sure, that it's been an ongoing thing. I mean, and now, like, if you would have told me then that, like, oh, yeah, you'll sit on Facebook and just shoot the shit with random trainers on a live video every week, like, I would have laughed at you and walked away because you're crazy. So it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I'm super impressed with what you've done and the consistency and it's awesome stuff. I'm curious, like anything that you would recommend? I mean, I know we just kind of covered a little bit about that, but anything else for beginning trainers that they need to do that they, you know, obviously they need to get out on social media and things like that. Anything that you've found is like absolutely critical, and of course we got to have a website, right?
So I think there's two things. One is the social media thing, and I think like the challenge that I just said is for anyone who wants to start training dogs to do that. Not because of the importance of social media presence, which I extremely believe in. I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah.
More than that is because you're going to be standing in front of clients. You're going to be standing in front of the world. You have to be able to be as comfortable as possible with who you are, right? Yeah. And obviously, everyone always continues to struggle with that. I think it's part of the human nature to continue to struggle with that. Anybody who tells you that they're 100% comfortable with who they are, I don't believe you. But I think that along that is the goal is to keep getting more and more comfortable with who we are, right? And the more comfortable we are with about who we are, the more people are going to want to work with you. They're going to feel comfortable and trust you. Your dog training is an interesting thing because it's a service, but it's a service that you're offering to this family member, whether we want to call it that or not. It's a family member that cannot speak about what happens when they're with that person. Whether you're doing board and trains or one-on-one, it cannot go back. So a kid or anyone goes out somewhere for a service, they can come back home, and if they trust their mom and dad, they could be like, Mom, Dad, I can't go back there. That guy's an ass, right? Your dog can't do that. And the level of trust that it takes to send a dog to that person is much stronger in a sense because 100%. It's just all trust. And if you want to have that trust, it starts by being comfortable with who you are, I think. And so you give that level of confidence in who you are, and people don't trust someone who's not confident with who they are. It's just a natural thing.
Let me add one little kind of like addition or caveat to that. So if you aren't comfortable, right? Because a lot of folks will hear you say that, and they've heard other folks, including me, say that if you're not comfortable, it's going to dissuade people. But if you can get on there, this is where it gets interesting. If you can get on video and you can call out your stuff honestly with integrity and be like, okay, I'm scared shitless, but I want to really I want to show you guys what I'm doing. I want to be 100% on, you know what I mean? Because it's a real honest conversation, right? So you've got people that are able to step into a space where they can operate with some confidence. Then you've got people that are trying to find their way into it. And the only people I don't trust are the ones that are bullshitting it. The ones that say like, okay, this is really hard, but let's jump into this, like, let's jump into this misadventure together. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'd be like, cool, I'll give you a lot of credit for that. You know what I mean? And so there is some wiggle room for people that don't have like all of this put together and ready to rock, if you can be honest. If you can like just drop all the ego stuff and just be like, you've heard me and Jeff and other folks talk about it, but it's like I mention all the time, like, go back and look at my old videos, go look at my old blog posts. They suck, they're terrible, they're like embarrassing. It's like, it just is what it is. And so it's critical that people see that we don't just jump out of the womb and we're like, there's a camera in our hand and a dog leash in the other hand, and we're like, ready, let's go. So it's important that people like, they see you doing super well with this. But I appreciate what you said earlier about, like, if you would have said that I would be doing this, I would have said you were crazy. So there was an arc that got you there. You know what I mean? There was work that you put in daily that helped kind of desensitize
And
you.
I cringe. I cringe when I see my old videos. They're still up on my social media, though. I'm never gonna take them down. Like, none of my shit's gonna come down. Even the stuff where, even dog training wise, where there are things that I did, and I would never train a dog the same way as I did then. But it's gonna
Yeah,
stay up because it's part of what got me to here. And like, I hate perfection. I hate people who throw out that vibe of being perfect, because we all know you're a human, and now I have no interest in talking to you.
yeah, 100%, 100%. So what else do you got? I know we're running in here, but I don't know if you've got to run or anything. But like, I'm
Now
all
we got time. I'm having fun.
okay.
So
I'm all yours.
so you switched from, I mean, not you switched. There's a, like, if you go to the Sean O'Shea social media, whether it's the Good Dog Sean O'Shea Facebook page, there is an interesting mix of stuff. So you have obviously the dog training stuff because you're the dog trainer, but then there's this whole other side of you that's like, I don't know if it would be called personal development stuff that you post or personal growth.
Yeah.
Where does that come into this dog trainer that you are?
Well, kind of going back to what I said earlier, is the air conditioner really loud, by the way?
No, it's fine, and I have my fan, so it's
Okay, so we're battling air
yeah.
conditioning and fans. So it kind of goes back to what I said before, and I'll be really honest, and that was that when I started to get into Caesar, life was a mess, and he recommended a couple books. One was The Power of Intention by Wayne Dyer. I think it was one of the first real books I got into, and diving into that book and really, really, like, because I was like, ooh, this book's got the magic that Caesar's got. Like, somehow he's conjuring up like things out of the cosmos, you know? So I really dove into that book. And of course, it didn't reveal all the dog training secrets, but it really, really massively helped me with so much baggage that I had. And I'd already been in therapy. I'd already been working on things, and my family, is pretty messy. So I'd already been working through to try and get to a better space. And then what was cool, and I call this term or this phrase like a trust bridge. And what I mean by that is that there's certain people in your lives or in your life that come across your that come into your world, and they offer you something. They offer you information, a book, a video, a concept. And because of the way you feel about them, how do I put this in the best terms? You, you give that information the benefit of the doubt. You give it the most you give it the best chance of being believed. And that doesn't mean you just blindly buy into it, but instead of going in super cynical and being like,
It's like getting a referral from a friend for something.
absolutely, like, go see this movie, you'll really dig it, right? So for me, it was like, so Caesar said, check out this and check out this and check out this, and I was like, okay, I really respect what you're doing. Let me. So what I want to get into is, like, as I was reading that book, his recommendation was causing me to read the pages. This is weird, but read the pages differently. If you just handed me that book and we didn't know each other and you were like, read this book, there wouldn't be the same value. But somebody who I had held in such high regard saying this book was pivotal for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to pull every juicy piece of fucking information out of this book, no matter how long it takes me to read it. And so that was a critical thing. And that trust bridge concept, I think, is pivotal for people that are looking to find new avenues into things. So I read that, and that really got me rolling on the personal development scene. And so I started going deeper and deeper. And like I said, I was doing therapy. And for me, I've always wanted to try and help folks, right? And so, like I said, family was a mess, friends were a mess. The common denominator seems to be me, but I swear there was more.
There was more.
There's more than just that. The band, all sorts of things were a mess. And what I started to do was put together through therapy and all of this kind of personal development work. I started to get more clarity, and for me, it was just a lot of confusion, man. Like, because coming from like alcoholic backgrounds, not me, but alcoholic backgrounds with the family, abusive backgrounds, and not to get into too much detail, but some pretty rough and tumble stuff. A lot of my world was pretty confusing to make sense of, right? So I didn't know what to feel about my parents. I didn't know what to feel about my family. I certainly didn't know what to feel about myself. I didn't trust myself. I didn't like myself. I didn't have any confidence in myself. And so what I started to do was rebuild all of that slowly. I mean, and I'm talking really slowly. And so that kind of coincided with the dog training world, and they kind of came together. And so I started having better skills as far as how I felt about life, and getting more clarity about my family and myself and friends and everything else. And then moving into the dog training world. And so that created this constant kind of like fuel, right? So I was motivated. I was once you start finding out answers, right? When life's been a wreck for 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, and you start finding answers, you can get awfully motivated. So I started diving into books and diving into other things and videos and all this stuff. And that got me really interested in like, okay, so this stuff just got me out of like valeting cars at 40 years old. And now I've got multiple businesses, and I'm not bragging, but like I've got all these different things kind of lined up. So what changed? And it was a simple answer. It was all mindset. It was a simple answer. I changed my mindset from being angry, what's the word? Not engrossed, but enveloped in victimhood, right? So what does that do? It makes you pissed off, it makes you annoyed, it makes you frustrated, it makes you blame everybody. You don't take any personal responsibility. And as you know, if you don't take personal responsibility, you don't find your way out of the paper bag, right? You're stuck because you're blaming everybody else, and the only person that can change it is you. So once I started to get these kind of foundational pieces that I was never taught, I was like, for one, this is changing my life. And for two, what if I managed to try and find a way to help share this information? And so T3 started to come together at the same time. And so it was me and Jeff and Laura, and we started talking about it, and we were all working on the same stuff at the same time. We're like, okay, so we've got dog training, we've got business, but there's this missing component no one's talking about. No one's talking about attitude and mindset and all of these things that get in the way of successful dog trainers, people that have great dog training skills, but they hate their clients or they hate their life or they're bitter or they're broken down, whatever it might be. And so we decided to try and create something that would allow people to have kind of what we figured were what we assessed as being the three biggies: how to be a great dog trainer, how to really function within business, and how to have your head really on straight. And so that kind of continued that whole thing. And as I watched it start to impact people, and people's lives were changing, and I got a lot of letters, and I got a lot of PMs, and a lot of different comments from people saying, man, what you shared with this or this or this or this book, that, you know, whatever, has changed my life. And I was like, wow, that's like, I would have given anything to have that information 20 years ago. So that inspired me to start doing things like, you know, I just did, hey, nice. I just signed 10 of those to go out. And the reason was like, okay, what's the one thing like that I didn't have when I was growing up? Well, there were a lot of things, but what was the one piece of kind of knowledge it kind of encompassed in one place that I didn't have? And what I tried to do was put that in that book. And it's not a perfect book, and it's a simple book, and it's a short book, but I tried really hard to fill it with the simple, like, things that wouldn't scare a 16-year-old away. Do you know what I mean? I wanted it to be like good for 40-year-olds, but also 14, 15-year-olds that are lost, and be able to pick it up and go like, okay, so he's saying some similar things to what I'm going through. So anyways, that's the kind of long and short of it, how I got into personal development stuff. And to be honest, it's been the biggest impact on the quality of my life. You know, my family and me weren't speaking for years and years and years and years. And so I managed to put that back together. I managed to build bridges with a lot of things that were broken. And especially within me, I managed to sort out relationships, like, not to go too far down the rabbit hole of like my disastrous life, but you know, now I'm in a different situation where, you know, I've got a long-term relationship and things are great, but none of that would have come to pass without me having done the work. And I guess my real pivotal, or not pivotal, but my real kind of critical point in this is that it seems to be the thing that gets pushed most to the side because it's the most uncomfortable.
Hardest, yeah.
It's so easy to be distracted by, and I'll call out Jeff on this because I love him to death. But when we first got together and were working, like, he put so much emphasis on work. It was the perfect distraction for him to not have to get into the things that were really kind of eating him up. And I remember sitting down with him on a Sunday morning after we'd done a T3 or something, and he was reading the newspaper, and I was like, Jeffrey, he's like, what? He's been grumpy. And I was like, how many $1 million ideas are you going to get out of that newspaper? And he was like, damn. It hit him, and he stopped reading the newspaper and he started going into all sorts of other things. And he's worked exceptionally hard to do a lot of work to repair a lot of the damage, and also just how he presents himself. Like, I can look back at Jeff at early T3s, and just Jeff in general, and he was a much more singular dimensional kind of creature. He was harder, firmer, more abrasive. Now he's got this really nice balance of accountability and firmness, but yet softness and support. And so he's managed to integrate some really nice things. So I'm super proud of him. And so what's interesting to kind of like wrap that part of it up is that Laura, me, and Jeff all happen to be in the same place at the same time as far as wanting to put our lives back together, because we were all kind of a mess. And so that's what we did. So we passed books around. Here's Seth's book. Here's this book. Try this. And it just helped us get to a different space. And so, and it also made us big targets, right? Like if you're going to talk about personal development, you might as well like have a gun to your head because you're going to look like a buffoon because it's an
And
easy
also
target.
there's this whole stay in your lane, you're a dog trainer thing.
Yeah, yeah, and fair enough, but it's like stay in your lane is such a diminishing, disregarding, disparaging thing. What if you happen to have the exact words that will help somebody that's watching this transform their life, and you don't say them because you got to stay in your lane? Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's literally the worst thing that could ever happen. Somebody's sitting here watching, and they're like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And Russ has got like an idea going through his head, and he's like, well, "I'm going to stay in my lane." You know what I mean? I think it's selfish, and I don't mean you. I just mean the concept. I think it's selfish, and I think it's one more way to try and keep dog trainers in their lane, like train dogs and shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? And so it's a fascinating world out there, and what I've noticed is some of the things with COVID has kind of like mellowed out some of the like vitriol. It's kind of like people have bigger fish to fry now than like trying to like attack every dog trainer in town.
For
So
now. For now.
100%. Let's see how long it lasts. But yeah, I just. It's been a weird journey, and I'd say the things that I'm most proud of um, are, working with the clients. And this might sound like contradictory because I just said like clients are my number one priority, but working with people at T3 and helping them launch their lives, man, there's not much better than that.
Yeah.
For the ones that do, because like I've got a long list of people in T3 that are like, "You're an asshole, you're a terrible person," and I get it. It's because a lot of people had hoped that there would be some put the key in the lock and be able to turn and be able to rock and roll, and the work involved is excessive, as you know,
Yeah.
and so so we've got people that are that are not super excited about it, but man, so many people have done so well that like I'm thrilled. No matter what happens with T3 in the future, I'm thrilled with the folks that have managed to come out and build their own careers and go after their dreams. We've even had people that have like come through and been like, "I don't want to be a dog trainer anymore,"
Yeah.
and they've gone off and done amazing things. And it's like that's fantastic. You
For
know what I
me,
mean?
T3 honestly was less about the dog training. I came there thinking it was going to be about dog training for me, and what I took out of it was much more about me than any dogs I ever worked with. And not to diminish the dog training side of it, but it wasn't what did it for me. For me, it was all the personal development stuff. It was like there's this whole other side that I'm missing. And I was at a point in my life then where I started to, I guess, go on this personal development journey, try to
Yeah,
actually care about who I was.
yeah,
Um, and like started to listen and to read and to instead of just watching TV and movies to actually like put important information in my head as much as I could. So
yeah.
it came at the opportune time because if I came to T3 a year beforehand, I probably would hate you. But it was like because I would have been in that state of like, this is just you talking stuff, right?
A bunch of bullshit. Yeah,
Yeah. But I was in the perfect state of already starting to work on myself where it was like when that all that discussion, like I remember the first 2 days, I was like, this isn't a dog training seminar. I was like, I was like,
I get my money back.
yeah, I'm like this is not. We're not haven't spoken about dog training yet, but at the same time, I was so happy about it because it wasn't. I realized it wasn't necessarily the dog training stuff I needed. And I mean, like I can always get more dog training information. I'm
Yeah.
always learning. All that stuff is great. But you asked me before, like, what's something I would say to someone who's just starting off with dog training? And I think what the second thing I was going to say, and I think this in general applies to anything you want to start off in and really go all in, is work more on yourself. Like was Jim Rohn, right? Work more on yourself than you do at work, right? Something like that.
Work harder on yourself than you do on your job.
Right. Okay. I had the right idea. And,
Yeah,
and
right on.
I heard him say that the first time. And I didn't really get it yet until I actually started to attempt to have my own business. And then
Yeah.
it all started to click. And I think that I see it all play out in dog training. Like everything you just described of the whole personal development journey, all the victimhood, the blaming, the boundaries, the accountability. It's literally what we talk about with dog training all the time. Like,
100%.
and for me, that was a big part of my dog training journey with my own dog, and that helped me figure out better ways of communicating things to owners. I think that like we can all, a lot of people, not we can all, a lot of people can teach dogs behaviors. And a lot of people can even teach owners how to teach behaviors, right? But I think the deeper work where it really gets real is the personal stuff, what's really holding it back, you know? And I know with my own dog, like I say all the time, my dog was extremely reactive, like dangerously reactive.
Yeah.
And I was also like, of course he was reactive. I was a reactive also, you know? I needed some serious training. I needed the structure and the boundaries and the all that stuff. And it was a journey. And I feel like part of what forced me into it was him. Because if an owner's not holding themselves accountable, the dog's gonna keep biting.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like it's all intertwined in a very deep way. And it's to me that's been a very interesting part of being on the teaching end of dog training rather than just teaching my own dog and trying to figure this out for myself.
Yeah.
But seeing the other side of it is how much of all this personal development stuff really is one and the same. Like to me, that's been a very strong thing that it keeps getting repeated. I see it over and over and over.
Yeah, like I said, it's got a bad name, but it's got a good outcome. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of folks feel like that it's super cheesy. And to be honest, it's helped me a ton with challenging clients, right? So every once in a while you come across a client who's, you know, for whatever reason, it has some issues, and you can tell like, okay, they're holding on to a lot of baggage. I had a client. They call me in when things get bad, right?
Yeah.
I typically don't talk on the phone or handle the emails, but this client had been very clearly explained how everything worked, the drop offs, when the updates come, when they get photographs, all of that stuff, and he at some point decided to lose it, and started like emailing us and was like, can I just get a picture of so and so? And we're like, well, you know, we'll be doing we're doing the update in a couple of days. And he's like, yeah, but why is it so hard to ask for, picture? Like, I'm just asking for a picture of my, like, it started to like slowly escalate and escalate. And it was like, I don't get it. I can't understand. Like, I'm not asking for hardly anything. And so it went on and on and on. And so finally I had to get on the horn with them. And so we talked about it for a long time. And my point is that if I wouldn't have had the emotional skills, I wouldn't have been able to walk him off the ledge, because he was freaked out, and he was like, I made a mistake. I didn't do enough research on you guys, and now I'm paranoid. I don't know what's going on with my dog. All I want is a photograph, and I can't. And I was like, well, you don't just want a photograph. You're demanding a photograph. There's a big difference here, and we were very clear with you about how things work. And he said, yeah, I know. And we went on and on and on. And so I said, look, I need you to come pick up your dog. And he said, it took me 4 months to be able to be prepared to be able to drop my dog off. And I was like, I get it, but I don't want to take your money. I don't want you to be unhappy. I don't want you to, write a bad review. I would rather refund you all of your money. You can come pick up your dog, and we'll go from there. And he's like, no. Yeah. And he really pushed back against that, because it was pushing back against what his ultimate goals were. He was scared, but he really wanted his dog to do better. And so we walked through it, and we kind of like battled, and I tried to find my way the best I could. And at one point I said, look, let me see if I can break this down really clear. when you are at the go home and you've got your dog, we'll call her Francis because Francis is always the mystery dog, right? And and I say, you've got to call your dog, you've got to recall your dog over, and your dog says no. Are you comfortable to press the button and correct your dog at a level that's going to make your dog uncomfortable for not coming to for
Yeah.
non-compliance? And there was silence. It was like, I hadn't really thought about that. And I was like, exactly. And this isn't about beating you up. This is about trying to serve you, you know? And so if I would have just been an angry, super contentious business owner and dog trainer, we could have easily gone off the deep end and created this contentious thing. Instead, we talked for an hour and a half. By the end of it, he's like, I was like, you can come pick up your dog, but I'm not going to give you a picture of it. Right? And he's like, I don't want to pick her up. I don't want the picture. I don't want to pick her up. I need to do this. I have to do this work. I got to separate. And so he did. He came back after like 2.5, 3 weeks, and he kicked ass, and he was an amazing client. And I like to talk about that because without me being able to, and it was a long conversation, I wish it was recorded, but having to navigate a lot of passive aggressive, like he was like, he had all of the best kind of arguments about what could be going on and like, why is this such a problem? And it went on and on and on. And finally he ended up being in a space where when I asked him, could you do the correction? He was like, that was the one that he was like, oh yeah, let me think about that. And I said, I'll give you a couple days. I won't charge you. I'll give you a couple days. Get back to me and let me know whether that feels realistic to you. Because if not, I'd rather you pick up your dog. No hard feelings. We'll refund your money. And he got back and he's like, no, I want to do it. And I'm ready. And he did. And he kicked butt. So my point of this long drawn out conversation is that without those skills in place, man, you end up being that ugly dog trainer that gets, the bad Yelp reviews or people, trashing you and things like that. Not that bad Yelp reviews can't come from anywhere, because I used to be accused of inviting, this was a great story. Back in the old days, I used to be accused on Yelp of inviting young ladies in to have cocktails for their go home sessions, and that we would sit and have cocktails and talk about their dogs, right? And I was like, wow, Yelp.
People come with good stuff over there.
What's
Yelp is like the Wild West of reviews. Like, you get the craziest shit there.
It really is. So that was a funny one. Anyways, so getting back to the personal development, without that, I think most people are going to find themselves being passive aggressive, being defensive, being contentious, pushing clients away, rather than being able to be kind of firm with their boundaries and being able to be kind and yet hold people accountable. I think they're going to struggle. And then like you can really damage your business that way. And so I was super proud of that phone call, because I was like, this is a challenging one. And I've had numerous conversations like that. And it's only been the amount of work I've done to be able to distance myself from like emotional reactions, kind of knee-jerk reactions. Go ahead.
The thing that's very cool about all of this to me is it's literally the same thing we're asking dog owners to do with their dogs, right? Separate yourself emotionally a little bit, because when you're so emotionally invested, you won't press that button. It's the emotions that fog it. And create those boundaries that's necessary. Be able to hold yourself and the dog accountable, but in a real way, not just in a way that feels good, right?
Yeah.
And essentially, it's like that whole discussion that you had with that guy is kind of the same discussion that we ask owners to be able to have with their dogs, right? And without that part of it, you could have the tools. You could have e-collars and prong collars and place forever and all of that great stuff.
Right.
But if you don't have the mindset behind it, like you said, it all starts from mindset. All the personal development stuff, it starts from mindset. That's the one thing that changed for you to change your life, right? And I think anyone who drastically changes their life, if they really boil it down to its mindset. And it's the same thing we're asking of owners. Like, if all you're doing is changing behavior, but not changing your mindset and changing the dog's mindset, you're going to struggle. And at the end of the day, there's no one that can change that but you, right? It has to be a real thing that you want it and that you're willing to be uncomfortable a little bit to get the bigger picture, to get what you really want out of it.
Here's the hard part about it is that you can do amazing training, you can coach your clients amazingly, but if your clients aren't willing and capable of punishing, and I know everybody hates that word,
Yeah.
but capable of punishing their dog for poor behavior, they don't get that same effect that you do. Like
Yep.
it doesn't just automatically transfer. Everybody likes to think, well, he's a trained dog and he understands e-collar. And it's like, yes, he does. But he also understands that different things come from you than comes from
Yep.
you. And so I've been working really hard at go home sessions to try and help clients truly understand that, like, you know, if you want to talk about like controversial, talk about like Gary Wilkes, right? Who is am I okay to talk about? Am I okay to bring his name up?
Yeah, the thing just got cut off for a second, so I didn't hear what you said that was controversial.
I said Gary Wilkes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Talk about Gary Wilkes.
So he's one of the few people that I read because
I see you in the comments sometimes.
yeah, when I'm feeling bold, right?
Yeah.
You make one wrong step and it's a land.
You're out.
Off you go to Mars. But he writes some really fantastic stuff. But one of the things, like, everybody, like, of course, hates the bonker and this and that. But one of the things I think is so valuable about what he does is that he actually has the clients do, like, he might train them and show them, but he has them do the punishment. Right. And a lot of folks, a lot of dog trainers are going to like push back against that and be like, that's unnecessary. I'm just telling you, like, from my own personal experience, I've watched it a million times. And when a dog knows, like, if you've got negative associations with your owner, negative perceptions, and negative patterns, there's only one way to push back against that. And it's not just doing like nice, easy obedience commands. You need to have your dog view you in a different way, right? It's how I worked through my stuff with my dog. I was firm as hell, but we had a great life together after that. But I was firm as hell. And I think that, like, one of the cool things about Gary, because he only does one-on-ones, he doesn't do board and train. So it's like he goes in and he's like, all right, we're going to roll up the bonker and we're going to get to work. And God bless him for being able to, like, walk into a house and be able to, like, hand somebody like a bonker and be like, it's correction time. But what I think the awesome byproduct of that is that the dog sees, oh, that came from you. Not Gary, but that came from you. And what it does is it creates a massive shift in perception of what the owner can do, but also my association of how I feel around the owner and my perception of who you are in general. And I'm not saying only Gary can do that. All of us can do that, but it's a really critical thing to contemplate for owners and for trainers.
Yeah, there's that personal aspect to it that changes the way the dog views it, right? And that's the part that I think people steer away from it, because there's this, and I have this even in the way I describe dog training a lot, where I see myself like going back and forth with it, because there's an aspect of reward and punishment or correction, but reward and punishment where you want to keep it kind of neutral in a sense, right? And there's a part of it where you want it just to be black and white. You don't jump on the table, done, right? You don't jump on people, done. And then there's another aspect of it where you want it to be, I don't let you do that, right? And I think that there's a...
Give me an example.
Well, this exactly right here, what we're discussing. So I can teach a dog, let's say, just use, I don't know, jumping on people, an easy one, right? We can teach a dog as trainers over and over, we don't jump on people. When you jump on people, there's a consequence. It's not something you do anymore, right? And the dog consistently gets it. The dog is also pre-patterned that when it's with its owner, because this dog is 2 years old, 3 years old, when it's with its owner, it jumps on guests, it jumps on the owner, and it gets attention for doing that. It gets rewarded for doing that consistently every single time since it's 8 weeks old, right? Yep. So we can stop the dog from jumping on people, but then because relationship is so powerful and because patterns are so powerful into a dog's mind, that as soon as it sees that owner, no matter how many times you corrected that dog, it jumps. And it's not because you, the trainer, didn't do your job. It's because now the owner has to do their job to say, I also don't let that. So Russ doesn't let, Sean doesn't let, but also mom and dad don't let. And then that's when it really sticks. And I think that's the part of where reward and punishment become personal. And there is a place for it to be personal. And there's this balance that I think of keeping it neutral while also saying, I'm taking it a little bit personal, bud. Like, you're disrespecting me. You're not just disrespecting rules, you're disrespecting me. And that's where you get to have like very serious change, and the relationship aspect of training does come into play very powerfully. Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of it, as much as a lot of trainers like to say it's all relationship or it's not relationship at all, right? I think it's really this perfect blend of keeping it neutral while also making sure that your relationship says you must respect me and I will do everything for you. And there's a back and forth relationship to it. And that's ultimately how you get a companion, not just a pet, right?
Right.
When there's both.
So your dog trainer can create those patterns and that foundation, and to where it's way easier for the dog to understand what those parameters are and what the consequences are. But like you said, if it's not personal, and if you've got a cupcake of a dog, fair enough. Maybe you can get away with a bunch of stuff. But for any kind of like medium to medium hard dogs, they're going to be like,
yep.
Right? They're going to want to see you prove that. And a lot of dog trainers don't want to acknowledge that. They want to find some kind of more pleasant, more sophisticated, more advanced protocols to be able to circumvent that. And I if I'm going to be really honest, I think it's bullshit. And I think it's a way of trying to market and address a situation in a way that feels more palatable rather than more honest, to be honest. And so if you're the owner and your dog likes to rush the door, I can bonk your dog, or I can e-collar correct your dog, and it's great. And your dog's like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not supposed to do that. And like, I'm not supposed to do it around Sean. But then when the owner does it and the dog's like, what do you mean? You too? And then it all changes. The dog's like, oh my God, like, I had no idea that you had it in you. And then things start to shift. And then you can, and what's beautiful about it is then you can build a truly fantastic relationship, because now you've got a dog who's like, oh, okay, I get it. We're in a good space. Human here, dog here. And we've got like a nice, respectful relationship. I'm going to behave myself. Consequences befall me if I do dumb things. Rewards come if I do great things, and it's a nice balance kind of thing. But I think what we're touching upon right now is something that I think a lot of owners, if they're watching, man, if they don't get the aspect, that component of that they have to be the one that issues the consequence, because it's the uncomfortable part. Nobody wants to do it. Nobody, like, even the dog, like, we don't like, it's no fun. But man, it's the only way for an owner with any kind of mild to serious dog to have that dog go, gotcha, 100%, I got you, and then be able to move on from that. You know? So that's an interesting topic that a lot of folks don't want to talk about, because it's the unsavory, part.
It's a conversation that I have by just about every go home session. And at the end of the day, what I tell everyone is, I'm not going to pressure you to do what you're uncomfortable with, but I'm going to tell you what results you'll get with what you do in either direction. With whatever you choose, I'll tell you what the results will be, right? And if you call me up in 2 weeks and say, hey, you're right, we got to do this, I'll walk you through it, right? Whatever it is that's necessary that you were having a hard time doing, I'll walk you through it. But I can also tell you that if we just do the hard work right away, you'll get the results you want right away also. And it's really, I think that's what I found to be the best way, because it's all on you now. It's like, I've done my work. You see I've done my work.
Yep.
Here's what you need to do, and you have the same work too, and you get the same results. You get everything the same once we do the hard stuff. And I think it's the hard stuff that really does the good work, I guess, at the end of the day, right? Yeah. And it's why people struggle.
It basically sounds like you just mimicked our entire, like, go home, like dialogue, you know? And from the beginning, I've always said the same thing, which is like, when I've talked to owners and they're like, and you probably experience the same thing, which is like, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I pet? Can I do this? I'm like, okay, look, so I wouldn't recommend you do this, 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 or this. That said, there are no absolutes here. We're all adults. If you feel like you want to do this, if you feel like you're compelled to do this, I'm not going to tell you no, but I am going to tell you, like you said, what the likely outcome of that is, right?
Right.
And so we'll let them know the same thing. It's like, if you will go ahead and you will do the punishment and you will step up and do the thing that's uncomfortable for you right now, and see that your dog will bounce back and that they're not going to, like, burst into flames or just you know uh, crack like crystal, then people can be like, oh wow, they can actually take it and move on from there. So we do the same conversation, and it's I'm very, very, very much I'm very much a part of the belief of personal responsibility. As you know, it's like, I was just talking with one of our trainers and I was like, look, your job is to do the best training you can do the best coaching that you can do, and then the owner's job is to do their best job. And
Yep.
and if they're not going to do it, then, to be honest, if you're going to maintain your sanity and maintain your love of this job and not become a bitter, angry curmudgeon of a dog trainer, then you need to be able to, like, step back and let people be adults and let them make their mistakes. And if they want to call you and ask for help, fair enough. But I always say, I make no absolutes. People always want me to give them an absolute. But can I do this? I'm like, I'm not going to give you an absolute. I'll tell you, my recommendation is to do this, this, and this for the first, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever. And then, depending on how hard the dog is, then if you are really, really firm on wanting to try it, then try it.
And
See,
see what happens.
right? Take in the data. Does my dog get worse? Does my dog stay the same? And then go from there. And if you don't see any fallout, beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. If you do see fallout, then it tells you some pretty important information, and you have to back up. So I love that you approach it like that, and I think it's hard for a lot of dog trainers to be that forthright and that honest about.
The cool thing, sorry, the cool thing about putting it in the owner's hands is, number one, they get to really see the power they play in it, right? In everything. It's like, this is what can happen on either way. Now do what you want, right? And
Yeah,
something that I explain to every owner, which kind of you were touching upon, but like, we all have, like, your 60-day period, 90-day period, however everyone breaks it up. I usually do 60 days for most dogs I work with. We're like, that's crunch time, right? You
yeah,
go all in during that period and you'll get better, long-lasting results.
yeah.
And like, I always use furniture, for example. I could use my own dog as a perfect example. So Marley, my problem child. So like, the one thing that I did properly when I got him was he was crated from day one when I brought him home, right? Every night he slept in a crate. When we left the house, he was in a crate. It didn't mean that he didn't find ways to eat shoes other times, but he was in a crate, right? When I wasn't.
Yeah.
But eventually I was like, hey, now, like, he's an adult. Let me let him sleep on the floor of my room. And I also was like, not really so figured out of, he was like an adult, maybe 7, 8 months. And he was like sleeping on a bed in the floor of my room. He slept in my bed, and everything was great, except he was still an ass. And so when I started to really, like, figure out that training is going to take more than just teaching him some behaviors, and obviously one of the things I did was start to separate him from me, put him in a crate at night, and structure and all those things. And we started to make massive headway, and things were changing. And I got to a really good place with him, and I was like, everything is awesome. Like, we're doing good. We're doing good for a while, right? We still struggle, but we're doing good. And I was like, that's the,
Can I ask what was the struggle? What did you
yeah.
guys?
So he was human reactive, dog reactive, got into many dog fights, um, bit somebody once before I was like, this is bad.
How bad did you bite?
Well, it wasn't bad, but he got her on the butt. Um, and it was like
Got her on the way.
on the butt, on her ass. But it could have been bad. That was the point, right? And I went to dog parks, obviously, because that's the place where dogs go to play and meet friends and all that. And there was dog fights there, and he got into a lot of dog fights. That was the main thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn my lesson because I thought it was just bad dogs. Like the other dog was bad and all that stuff. But when I eventually realized, like, and besides for all of that, he like cost me so much money. I mean, he ate my passport, he ate my glasses, he ate my favorite shoes, and I like shoes. Like he destroyed a lot of money's worth of stuff, and it's amazing that he's still alive from the stuff he's ingested.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like a laundry list of stuff. But when it comes to, like, as you know, reactivity, you need boundaries. I mean, everything you need boundaries, but reactivity is a serious one, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the big things that I started to do, obviously, was starting to crate him. After a while of us like reaching a good level where there was still some struggles here and there, but we were like at a, I guess you'd call it a plateau, right? Things were going smooth.
Yeah.
I decided, I was like, let's see what happens if I let him sleep on the floor, on a bed, not in my bed, but on the floor, on a bed in my room. Yeah. I was like, I love having my dog with me. And at that point, he was my only dog. So I was like, I wanted my dog with me. So I let him sleep there. And I would say after about 3 days, I saw him starting to be more disrespectful to me during the day. And it was very clear because that was the one thing I changed. It was almost like I wanted to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it was the one thing that I changed. And there was moments where, because I know him very, very well, and we have a really strong bond, that I started to see things of him. You can call it disrespect or defiance or whatever you want to call it, but it was more like he was like challenging a little bit, right? And when I switched it back, after a couple of days, it went back. I can't tell you why, and I honestly don't care much. I know that it changed him. Right now, my point of why I'm saying this whole story was, I tell owners, like, keep your dog off of human furniture, crate your dog at night, all these things. And a lot of that is challenging stuff for the average dog owner who, just like me, I wanted my dog to sleep on the floor of my room, not even in my bed, right? Just the floor of my room.
Yeah.
And it's challenging stuff. But what I tell everyone is, if you keep to it all the way for, let's say, the 60-day period that I give you, and things are going really well, and then you say, all right, we really want him to hang out on the couch with us when we watch the game, right? And you invite him up, he comes on the couch. And then you start to see some level of disrespect or pulling on the leash, even though it sounds like there's no connection, but there totally is. And you start to see that, you know exactly what you changed and you know exactly how to fix it. If you never go all in, you're never going to know what changed because you never changed anything. You're never going to see what's the correlation between anything.
Right. And I think it's important, like you said, if you're going to start to, if you got a dog in a pretty good spot, if you're going to add something, then add one thing.
Yeah.
So you can like scientifically look at it and go, okay, how many things have changed here? We got one, right? Rather than like, well, we let him on the bed, then we also let him do loose leash walks, and then we did like, it's like, well, which one is it? You know, so smart on your part that you checked that and then said, okay, that's working so well.
All right, I want to wrap this up, but I want one question that I ask everyone who I chat with. I think I know your answer from our discussion, but I'm going to ask it anyways.
Yeah.
If there was one thing that you wish every dog owner knew, everyone's listening, every dog owner, what would that be?
Is there a time limit?
We'll sit while you sit and think.
If there was one thing that I would want dog owners to know, is that without your dog buying in and believing that you can issue consequences, and that doesn't, like, consequences go in both directions, rewards and you know, punishment. But especially the punishment. The rewards are super easy, but if I could get owners to understand that they won't break their dogs, that they won't damage their dogs, but that they can absolutely go after them with some significantly firm stuff and create literally the dog they want and the lifestyle they want, where they can take the dog anywhere. They can, you know, in the car, on the walks, outside restaurants, all the different stuff. Like, of course, there's exceptions, but if I could get, it's the same question I ask all of our staff. We get a new dog. First question I ask: how soft's the owner? How firm's the dog? It's the first thing I ask, and they're like, well, dog's pretty firm, owner's pretty soft. Like for me, that is the critical. That's a critical component. And a lot of people don't want to hear that because people don't want to be mean to their dogs. People don't want to correct their dogs. People don't want to punish their dogs. I get all of that, but the dogs don't really care much. The reality is, like, if I could get every client to be able to take their emotional part of this and be able to kind of set it aside and then go out and share consequences for really bad choices in a neutral, confident, assertive fashion, most of them would stop they wouldn't need us.
Yep.
You know, to be honest, like if I could just get owners to feel comfortable because they've been so programmed that all that stuff's nasty, negative, going to cause fallout, going to ruin the relation, you know, the whole drill. So that would be my biggest thing. Like I could give you all sorts of like flowery, like nice stuff that sounds great. But to be honest, like you give me an owner that comes in that's like, give it to me, give it all to me. Like share every single thing. I'm ready for it all. You're going to kick ass. I got no worries about you. You come in and you're timid and you're worried. I don't want to hurt his feelings and I feel sad and I feel bad. You're going to struggle. So that's the thing. That's not a popular opinion. I get it. A lot of folks aren't going to dig it, but I just watch it over and over and over again. And when you see that the dogs change with us as they do with you, it's like, well, what's the connective tissue here? Like what changed? What did we do differently besides having a neutral association? What did we do differently that allowed this dog to make a massive change? And it's typically what I just shared. It's like firm consequences, knock that crap off. Here are the rewards for doing the right stuff, and make life crystal clear. And without any guilt, without any, being freaked out about it. Next thing you know, you got a dog that's doing great. Now, if we can get owners to get out of that like broken heart, emotionally melting down space, man, they can be in a really great spot. But culturally right now, we're in a very difficult place with that right now. And so that's probably the biggest challenge and probably why we'll all be in business for quite some time.
Yep. I'd say like if owners just understood that reward is not all it takes and that that whole ideology is just a lie. And if they understood that, I mean, I think we'd all find different jobs really quickly. Maybe I'd go back. Maybe we'd be walking dogs, but not training them. Right. And
yeah. But here's the last question. Like, do you really think that smart, logical people, and I know people get indoctrinated by all sorts of like propaganda and stuff. Do you really think, and this is something I was thinking about this morning, do you really think that they don't know that somewhere deep down?
I think they know it. They don't feel it. And
don't feel it. What do you mean by that?
Meaning they can logically understand. So if you use a simple example, right? Break it down to the simple thing. If a toddler runs in the street, do you give them a lollipop? And every single person will laugh at that because obviously we don't give them candy for running in the street, right? There is some consequence to that. However, your mom and dad decided to do it, you had a punishment of some sort, right? It's just the reality. And if you didn't, your parents weren't being good to you. It's just fact.
Yeah.
And when you break it down that simple, everyone's going to agree, right? Or think about it like, I was on the highway 2 weeks ago. I was speeding. I was late coming home from a client's house. I had my hair down, the music blasting, and I was going really fast and I was having fun. And all of a sudden the lights came on behind me. And I pulled over and I said, officer, give me the ticket because I know I did it wrong. I was punished. Guess what? I drive much more careful now when I'm on the highway, right? It's been 2 weeks. The punishment still matters to me. Yeah. It's very logical. It makes total sense. The problem is when it's attached to something as emotional as the bond we have with our dogs, that is majority of the bond that we have with dogs is an emotional thing. There's something intrinsic to it. that connects us to these animals. It's unexplainable, right?
Yep.
And when that part comes in, all of a sudden we get fogged up, and the logic goes on the back burner, and it becomes all emotion. You could have the smartest people who are running big companies, and their dogs misbehave, right? I mean, I used to know a guy who's a vet, an extremely brilliant guy, and his dog was horrible, right? But it's not because he doesn't understand that there has to be consequences in life. He wouldn't have made it to where he is in life if he didn't understand that.
Right.
It's because he doesn't feel that, and that the feelings override it all. And I think that
he's not capable. He's not willing to feel it, like, because the discomfort.
I think it's a natural human thing to, without working on it very, very carefully, to allow feelings to emotions. When I say feelings, I mean emotions to override other things, because we're naturally very emotional creatures, right? And yeah, we're logical too, but I think just intrinsically, emotion plays a very strong role in decision making.
Yeah.
And unless we train ourselves to try to bring more logic into that, it could be very difficult for the average person, even a very brilliant, logical person, when it comes to something that emotional, to allow the logic to come back into play. And it's like this battle of logic, emotion, back and forth. And I guess that's the whole balance of it all. But I think that's the struggle. I mean, I think that's the struggle of society as a whole, is logic versus emotions. That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, and I think dogs probably trigger the emotion in so many ways that humans, like, it's sad to say, but humans don't trigger in the same way.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, as we both know, and I know you need to get off here, but the gravitational pull towards dogs versus humans is oftentimes far stronger. And so what's the last thing you want to do? Punish the one thing that makes you feel good in the world.
Right. And that's the key, that it just makes you feel good. Right. And like, last thing, because then we're going to wrap it up because I got a bunch of dogs that are hungry. Yeah. But I think that this is a personal thing that I found, is when I came to a place of knowing that the firmness, the structure, the not fun stuff was also coming from a place of love, was when I was able to really make that shift in a real way. Because I wasn't punishing my dog for fighting with other dogs, or for pulling on the leash, or for any of the many things that he needed to be told to stop doing. Like, take a simple thing, eating a shoe. Like, of course I was pissed off at him for eating my shoes. Like, I love those shoes, but he could have died, right? If I really, really love this creature, then I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure he doesn't kill himself. It's coming from a place of love. And I think that pertains to everything. If you think about the bigger picture of what the relationship you're trying to have with this animal that we have these strong bonds with, imagine how much greater your relationship would be if he stopped pissing you off, right?
Yeah.
And that's,
what's Jordan Peterson say? Like,
don't allow your children to do anything that makes you dislike them. I wrote a whole post, don't allow your dogs to make you do anything that makes you dislike them. And a couple people got where I got it from.
100%. Yeah. Awesome.
So I think that's what it boils down to. All right, man. This was really cool. I had a great time.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. Whoever stayed through this whole thing, you guys are cool. Love you all. Have an awesome night, and stay kind to each other.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.